"My ribs are already broken," she whispered, but the Mafia boss held her through the pain. An emergency room nurse witnesses something she was never meant to see. Brutally attacked and left for dead, she wakes up in the mansion of Chicago's most feared crime lord. He gives her a choice: stay as his prisoner or face death on the outside. What begins as captivity turns into something neither expected when she saves his life from betrayal within his own ranks. His blood-stained hands show unexpected gentleness, touching wounds deeper than her broken ribs. But just as walls between them crumble, FBI agents storm the compound, led by her own brother. As bullets fly and secrets emerge, a shocking truth connects them from the past. He once tried to save her mother's life years ago. What happens when the daughter of the man who destroyed his family becomes the only weakness of a Mafia boss trying to escape his violent life? And will their broken pieces fit together before enemies destroy them both? Through a haze of pain, Julie drifted in and out of consciousness. The smooth, leather seats of the Escalade contrasted sharply with the rough hands that had beaten her moments before. Every breath sent daggers through her ribs, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Voices filtered through her semi-conscious state, deep, masculine tones discussing her fate in clipped Italian phrases. She caught fragments. Ospedale, testimonies, Rossi. Her medical training screamed at her to stay awake, knowing the dangers of concussion, but the darkness kept pulling her under. A gentle pressure against her side made her whimper. "Stay still, Piccola," came that same commanding voice from earlier. Nico. Even in her confused state, she recognized the authority in his tone. "Marco, apply more pressure. She's bleeding." The SUV swerved, and pain exploded through her body. Julie forced her eyes open, meeting Nico's intense gaze. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the perfectly tailored suit that couldn't quite hide the weapon holstered beneath. His hands, when they brushed her arm to check her pulse, were surprisingly gentle for someone who radiated such dangerous energy. "Where?" She tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. "Don't talk," Nico ordered, but without harshness. "You've got at least 2 broken ribs and a concussion. Save your strength." Julie's nurse training kicked in, making her assess her own injuries. Definitely broken ribs. Possible internal bleeding. The way her vision kept blurring suggested a serious concussion, but it was the memory of those men in the parking lot, the casual way they'd executed their victim, that made her heart race with panic. The car's movement jostled her again, and she couldn't suppress a cry of pain. Immediately, Nico's hand was on her shoulder, steadying her. "Marco, tell Antoni to drive more carefully. We need her stable." Through her pain-fogged mind, Julie noticed they weren't heading toward any hospital she knew. The Chicago skyline was moving in the wrong direction. Fear sparked through her again, momentarily clearing her thoughts. "Please," she managed to whisper, "I need a hospital." Nico's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those dark eyes. "You'll receive medical care, but not at Chicago Memorial. The Rossis have too many connections there." His thumb traced an absent pattern on her shoulder, at odds with his commanding presence. "You're safer with me." Julie wanted to laugh at the irony of that statement, but her ribs protested even the thought. Safer with the man who'd ordered her kidnapping, but he had protected her from the gunfire, using his own body as a shield. Nothing made sense. The car turned down what felt like a private drive, and Julie caught glimpses of high walls through the tinted windows. Her medical training warred with her rising panic. She needed immediate treatment, but she was completely at the mercy of these men. "Stay awake," Nico commanded, noticing her eyes starting to close again. "That's an order, Piccola." "Not your soldier," Julie managed to mumble, surprising herself with her defiance even in this state. A sound that might have been a chuckle came from one of the other men, quickly silenced by what she assumed was a glare from Nico. Despite her situation, Julie felt a small flicker of satisfaction at causing that reaction. The car stopped, and Julie felt herself being lifted with extraordinary care. Her head rested against Nico's chest, the expensive fabric of his suit soft against her cheek. She could hear his steady heartbeat, feel the controlled strength in his arms as he carried her. "My private physician is waiting," Nico said, his voice rumbling through his chest. "He's discreet and very skilled. You'll receive proper care." Julie wanted to protest, to demand proper hospital treatment, but the pain and exhaustion were overwhelming. The last thing she registered was passing through ornate doors into what appeared to be a mansion, the contrast between luxury and danger mirroring the man who carried her. "Set up the medical equipment in my private suite," she heard Nico order someone. No one enters without my explicit permission. And find out everything about her. Who she is, where she lives, her family. The Rossis saw her face. We need to know what we're dealing with." Despite her semi-conscious state, Julie felt a chill at his words. They were treating her injuries, but she was also their prisoner. She tried to focus on the details around her, the layout, the number of guards, anything that might help her later. But the darkness was becoming impossible to fight. The last thing she felt was being placed on what felt like the softest bed she'd ever touched, incongruous with the danger of her situation. Gentle hands started assessing her injuries, and Nico's voice came from somewhere above her. "Take care of her. If anything happens to her, under your care, you'll answer to me personally." Julie finally surrendered to unconsciousness, carried away on a tide of pain medication someone had administered. Her last coherent thought was that she'd survived one nightmare, only to wake up in another, one ruled by a man whose gentleness might be more dangerous than the brutality she'd escaped. The first sensation Julie registered was softness, expensive sheets against her skin, nothing like the scratchy hospital linens she was accustomed to. Pain followed immediately after, sharp stabs with each breath that made her gasp. Her eyes fluttered open to a room that belonged in a luxury magazine, not a medical facility. Sunlight filtered through partially drawn silk curtains, casting a warm glow across the massive bedroom. Medical equipment created an incongruous picture against the rich wood paneling and elegant furnishings. An IV stand next to an antique armoire, a heart monitor beside a crystal vase filled with fresh flowers. "Ah, you're awake!" The gentle voice belonged to an elderly man examining her vitals with practiced efficiency. His silver hair and kind eyes gave him a grandfatherly appearance, but the expensive suit under his white coat spoke of Castellano money. "I'm Dr. Reeves. You've got 4 broken ribs and extensive bruising, my dear, but with proper rest, you'll make a full recovery." Julie's nurse training kicked in automatically as she assessed her own condition. The pain medication was wearing off, making each breath a struggle. Her head throbbed, and patches of purple bruising bloomed across her torso. Dr. Reeves adjusted her IV drip with steady hands that spoke of decades of experience. "Try not to move too much," he advised. "I'll be back to check on you in a few hours." Left alone, Julie tried to piece together the previous night through her fractured memories. The hospital parking lot, the execution she'd witnessed, the brutal beating that followed, and then Nico Castellano, emerging from that black escalade like an avenging angel of death. The door opened without warning, and Julie's breath caught as the man himself strode in. Nico Castellano commanded attention like gravity commanded mass, an irresistible force that drew all eyes to him. His tailored suit emphasized broad shoulders and a powerful frame, while his dark eyes assessed her with predatory focus. "How are you feeling?" His voice was deep, accent barely detectable. "Like I was kicked repeatedly by thugs," Julie replied, refusing to show fear despite her racing pulse. Which, coincidentally, I was. A slight smile curved his lips. "Most people wouldn't dare speak to me with such attitude. Most people probably aren't being held prisoner in your home. You're not a prisoner. You're under protection." He moved closer, and Julie forced herself not to shrink back. "The Rossis saw you last night. They now believe you're connected to my organization. That makes you a target." Julie's medical training let her see what others might miss. The careful way he held himself, ready for violence at any moment. The controlled breathing of someone always alert for threats. The subtle scanning of the room that spoke of ingrained paranoia. "I need to leave," she insisted. "I have a job. A life. Ah, yes, your life as an ER nurse at Chicago Memorial." Nico's tone remained casual, but his words sent ice through her veins. "Your apartment on North Lake Shore Drive. Your estranged brother Jackson, who's managed to accumulate quite substantial gambling debts with my organization." Julie's heart stopped. "Leave my brother out of this. I'm offering you a choice." Nico sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Stay here as my personal nurse while you recover. Give me time to locate your brother and resolve his situation. Or leave now, with the Rossis believing you're under my protection, but without actually having it." The threat was clear. Julie's hands clenched in the silk sheets. "That's not a choice. That's extortion. That's business." He stood smoothly. "Rest, recover. We'll discuss details once you're stronger." Hours later, a maid delivered dinner that Julie barely touched, her appetite destroyed by pain and fear. She forced herself to explore her gilded cage, each movement sending daggers through her ribs. The suite was larger than her entire apartment. Bedroom, sitting area, marble bathroom with a soaking tub she couldn't use with her injuries. Designer clothes filled the closet, all in her size. The attention to detail was unsettling. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, Julie surveyed the sprawling estate. Manicured gardens stretched to high stone walls. Armed guards patrolled with military precision. The Chicago skyline glittered in the distance, taunting her with its proximity and inaccessibility. Her phone, purse, and ID were gone, along with any chance of contacting the outside world. When she tested the bedroom door, she found it locked from the outside. The luxury surrounding her suddenly felt suffocating. Julie pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching darkness settle over the grounds. Somewhere out there, her brother was in danger because of debts to these people. Somewhere out there, the Rossi family was hunting for her. And here she was, trapped in a beautiful prison with a man who dealt in violence as casually as she dealt in bandages. A knock announced another check from Dr. Reeves. His gentle manner couldn't hide the authority in his movements. This was clearly someone used to treating injuries that couldn't be reported to normal hospitals. "The pain medication will make you drowsy," he warned, injecting something into her IV. "Try to rest. Your body needs time to heal." Julie watched him leave, heard the lock click behind him. As the medication began to take effect, she fought to keep her eyes open, to maintain some control over her situation. But the combination of drugs and exhaustion proved too powerful, and she drifted off to the distant sound of security patrols moving beneath her window. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Julie shifted on the bed, her ribs protesting even that small movement. Sleep had eluded her most of the night, her mind racing with plans. In the bathroom earlier, she'd discovered a handful of hairpins in a drawer, clearly left by design, like everything else in this gilded prison. Now, with trembling fingers, she worked one pin into the lock. Her father had taught both his children basic lock-picking skills. "Just in case," he'd said. The irony wasn't lost on her. After several tense minutes, the lock clicked softly. Julie eased the door open, her heart pounding. The hallway stretched before her, its walls adorned with priceless artwork. She moved carefully, each step calculated to minimize the pain in her chest. Armed guards stood at various points throughout the mansion, their expressions neutral as she passed. None moved to stop her. "He's testing me," she realized. The guard's behavior was too uniform, too rehearsed. Nico was allowing her to explore her cage, perhaps hoping she'd recognize the futility of escape on her own. The study door stood slightly ajar. Julie slipped inside, drinking in details that might prove useful. Rich mahogany bookshelves lined the walls. A massive desk dominated one end, while a chess set with hand-carved pieces occupied a side table. But it was the folders spread across the desk that caught her attention. Her brother's face stared up at her from surveillance photos. Jackson, meeting with men she recognized from news reports about organized crime. But more disturbing were the images of him with others, men whose stiff postures and careful positioning screamed law enforcement. The implications made her head spin. A sudden movement sent fire through her ribcage. Julie gasped, stumbling backward into the chess table. Precious pieces clattered to the floor, several snapping on impact. She followed them down, landing hard on her knees as pain blazed through her chest. "I wondered how long it would take you to break free." Nico's voice came from the doorway, low and controlled. Julie looked up at him through tears of pain she couldn't hide. "My ribs are already broken," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "Whatever you're planning to do about this, you can't hurt me worse than I already am." Something flickered in his dark eyes as he crossed the room. Not anger, but recognition. Understanding. He knelt beside her with fluid grace, and Julie flinched instinctively. But his hands were shockingly gentle as they slipped beneath her. "Hold on to my neck," he instructed quietly. Julie complied, too weak from pain to resist. His body radiated heat through the thin silk nightgown someone had dressed her in while unconscious. She could feel the controlled strength in his muscles, smell the subtle cologne that clung to his skin. The intimacy of it was more disturbing than any threat of violence. As he carried her through the mansion's winding corridors, Julie caught glimpses of luxury that would normally take her breath away. Crystal chandeliers, oriental rugs, priceless artworks. But all she could focus on was the steady rhythm of Nico's heartbeat where her head rested against his chest. He laid her carefully on her bed, just as Dr. Reeves hurried in, medical bag in hand. The elderly physician's face creased with concern as he examined her. "The escape attempt has aggravated your injuries," he said, preparing a syringe. "You need complete bed rest for at least another week. No more adventures." Julie watched Nico through half-closed eyes as the doctor worked. His expression revealed nothing, but his posture had shifted subtly. Less predatory, more protective. It confused her almost as much as it frightened her. As evening painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Nico returned carrying a covered tray. "My chef insisted on preparing something light but nutritious," he said, setting it beside her. "You need to keep up your strength." Julie stared at him, baffled by this show of consideration after she'd invaded his private space and destroyed what was likely a priceless antique. "Why aren't you angry? About the chess set, the snooping?" "I recognize a caged bird when I see one," he replied, his voice holding an edge of something that might have been empathy. "Breaking your wings further would serve no purpose." He placed something else on her nightstand, a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Julie's breath caught. It wasn't just any edition, but the specific vintage printing she'd mentioned loving in a 5-year-old blog post about classic literature. "How much research have you done on me?" she whispered. "Enough." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Rest, Julie. Tomorrow is another day." She watched him leave, her mind whirling with questions. The man who'd ordered her kidnapping, whose hands she'd seen covered in blood, had just treated her with more gentleness than she'd experienced in years. The contradiction made her head ache almost as much as her ribs. As darkness claimed the room, Julie fingered the soft leather binding of her favorite novel. Every item in this prison was chosen with deliberate care. The clothes in her size, the medical supplies, even this book. She was being watched, studied, provided for in ways that spoke of long-term planning rather than impulse. The question was, why? Julie leaned against the balcony railing, watching Nico's men train below. The morning sun highlighted their precise movements as they sparred and practiced weapon drills. Her ribs protested when she shifted position, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache after 3 days of rest. The security team moved with military precision, their actions revealing why Nico's organization was considered untouchable in Chicago. 2 men demonstrated knife techniques while others practiced hand-to-hand combat. Their lethal grace reminded her of Nico himself, controlled violence wrapped in expensive suits. A knock interrupted her observations. Julie expected Maria, the quiet maid who usually brought breakfast, but Alexander's tall frame filled the doorway instead. Nico's lieutenant carried a silver tray, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Barnes. I thought I'd personally check on your recovery." His politeness felt artificial, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Julie watched him arrange the breakfast settings, noting how his gaze swept the room with calculated intensity. "That's thoughtful of you." "Nico's very invested in your well-being." Alexander straightened his Italian silk tie. "Though he's occupied with business associates in the city today. Important meetings, you understand." The casual mention of Nico's absence made Julie's skin prickle. After Alexander left, she lifted the silver dome covering her breakfast and found a burner phone underneath. The note beside it was brief: "Call for help or die here." Later that morning, Julie explored the East Wing, the section Nico had declared safe for her supervised wandering. Her nursing training had taught her to observe details others might miss, like how certain guards tensed when she passed, their hostility poorly concealed. Voices drifted from a partially open door. Julie recognized Alexander's smooth tenor, speaking rapid Italian. Her grandmother, Sophia, had insisted on teaching her the language during childhood summers in Naples, a skill apparently missing from the extensive background check Nico had run. "The security rotation changes at midnight," Alexander said in Italian. "Castellano trusts me with the protocols. Once I deliver the nurse, our alliance is sealed." Julie's heart thundered. The Rossi family, it had to be them on the other end of that call, the same men who'd beaten her nearly to death. She retreated silently, mind racing. In the kitchen, she overheard 2 maids discussing her while loading the dishwasher. "Commissioner Barnes's daughter," one whispered. "Her father destroyed the old Don Castellano 15 years ago. Half the organization still blames that takedown for our losses on the south side." Suddenly, Julie's presence here carried new weight. She wasn't just a random witness. She was the daughter of Nico's father's destroyer. No wonder some of his men looked at her with barely concealed hatred. The day crawled by as Julie processed these revelations. When dusk painted the sky in deep purples, car engines rumbled up the long driveway. Through her window, she watched 3 black SUVs approach the mansion. Nico was back early. Movement caught her eye. Alexander slipping behind the garden shed, phone pressed to his ear. His furtive glances confirmed her suspicions about his loyalty. "Beautiful sunset, isn't it?" Julie spun around. Alexander stood in her doorway, gun aimed steadily at her chest. His polite mask had vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Time for a midnight drive," he said softly. "Don't make this difficult." Julie's mind raced through options. The burner phone lay hidden beneath her mattress, useless now. Her ribs had healed enough for movement, but not combat. Through the window she could see Nico's men escorting him inside, unaware of the betrayal unfolding above. "They'll know I'm missing," she said, buying time as she edged away from Alexander. He smiled without warmth. "By then you'll be with the Rossies, a gift to cement new alliances, though they might not be as gentle with you as Nico has been." Julie's back hit the wall. The balcony lay 3 steps to her right, a 40-foot drop to the manicured lawn below. The door was 15 feet behind Alexander, and screaming would only get her shot before help arrived.